Thank you, Bermuda, for joining us on this one-on-one live interview with Premier Burt. TNN, in conjunction with Crimson Multimedia, Channel 82, co-producing this project. Let us bring in the Premier into the room. Premier Burt, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you, Trevor. It's a little bit hard to hear you.
We're adjusting that now. First of all, thank you for allowing me this one-on-one production with you, sir. How's the audio now?
We can go ahead. It is low, but I can hear.
Can't hear it. Yeah? Okay, so let me start off. Can I start? Yes.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Premier Burt, Bermuda is in the eye of a storm, which is hitting us very hard, and Bermudians are truly unsettled and not happy. The storm has few systems, including COVID and the fallout, rapid decline in tourism and related job losses, mounting debt, and community discontentment over the locals struggling to survive. Looking at these areas, as you as the leader, where to from here?
Well, thank you, Trevor, for the question. And I would say that certainly Bermuda, like the entire world, is in a storm, and a storm that has happened from a once-in-a-century pandemic. But as a country, we will be judged by how we recover from this pandemic, and that is where the government's focus is. The government has worked to manage the healthcare crisis and has a plan in place to deal with economic recovery. But what is vital and important for the government is to make sure that we execute on those plans. And that is where we are certainly focused. Trevor, can you hear me?
Yeah, my next question, there is a clarion call for you to step down. Yeah, I can hear you. There is a clarion cry for you to step down, Premier Burt, with many citing no confidence in your leadership. Do you understand the sentiment of the public?
I'm not going to put it in the form of clarion call. But one thing I will note is that not everyone supported me or the Progressive Labor Party to be the government of this country. So I will always recognize and understand that there are people who are not going to support the work, but that's democracy. But my job is to make sure to lead the government and to make sure to make the difficult decisions which are necessary. This government has made the difficult decisions which have been necessary. We have provided assistance and support for persons, generous assistance and support. We are focusing on making sure we get people retrained and retooled and making sure that we get people back to work. And so from that perspective, we are going to be judged by the voters when we go back to the polls. And until that time, we are going to be focused on the job of working and executing for the people. If you look across the breadth of the government, the work which is taking place through various ministries, whether it be on social services, whether it be on economic side, whether it be on the labor side. We see ministers that are working hard to deliver for the people of this country, supported by uh, a public administration or public officers who are working day in and day out under incredibly difficult circumstances to continue to provide public services for the country.
Thank you. For a few months back, when the island's biggest and most powerful union, the Bermuda Industrial Union, expressed dismay over over the decertification clause in the labor laws, you described it as being about something within the party and not about the policies. Do you still believe this to be true?
I do not believe that it is a fundamental disagreement on policy because the policy in that regard did not change. It was the same policy that was supported and brought into law in 2000 when Dame Lois Brown Evans was the Attorney General in the first Progressive Labor Party government. But we must always remember that at no point in time will everyone, even if you're in a family, Trevor, your family doesn't agree on everything, my family doesn't agree on everything. But as a country, we have to make the decisions which are in the best interest of moving the country forward. That's what a government is charged with, taking account of every circumstance, coming to the best solution, and moving forward. We believe that the changes to the labor laws and the upgrades to the Employment Act, which included numerous provisions which strengthened unions, strengthened workers' rights, made sure we made accommodation for workplace bullying and harassment. All of those things are great strides, and we are proud of the work of which we've done in that regard. And I'm proud to be the government that supported those changes, made the difficult decisions, and the country and the workers of this country are benefiting from those new laws.
Uh, my next question on the same labor felt that the administration, your administration, is responsible for the major split in labor, and as such, it will take a new leader or a change of approach for the labor government to come together, for labor to come together again. What are your thoughts on this?
I don't agree. What I know is that we are working hard to deliver for the people of this country. And when I have conversations with members of the fact is that we agree with more than we disagree. But what members of the labor unions want are the same things the government wants. A successful country in the future that provides for adequate employment, where people can work, take care of their families, raise their families, access good education services, have good opportunities for employment, and make sure that they can save and invest for the future. Those are all the things which this government is focused on, and those of our attention had to be put towards the pandemic. What we are focused on is our economic recovery plan, and what we are focused on is delivering for the people of this country, the workers of this country. And I think that if you will see from our record, we have made major strides when it comes to labor protection and major strides in executing our agenda and delivering on our promises.
We're going to just turn to the economic state at present. There's a big cry now from government to hasten its steps to bring about tax reform. And in that cry, we hear various quarters calling for some form of tax on the multinationals. Is there any consideration? If not, why not?
The Minister of Finance, I think, has spoken on the global tax reform initiative, which is taking place. They have not finalized what the proposals are, but Bermuda has signed up to that framework. And it is going to be a major change in our system of taxation, not only here in Bermuda, but globally. We must wait for the final details of that to come from the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, better known as the OECD. And at that point in time, we will focus our work on making sure that we make our tax system changes align with the global norms. But I think it's important, Trevor, for your listeners to understand that this government did not wait to make changes to our system of taxation. And I always want to point out that persons who are making $48,000 a year have seen a $2,000 lower taxes underneath this progressive Labor Party government than they saw before. In our election manifesto in 2020, we committed to eliminating taxes for persons who made under $48,000 a year. Anyone who makes under $96,000 a year has seen a reduction in taxes under this government. And those persons who make above have seen an increase. But we recognize that it is vital to make sure that Bermuda is an expensive country. And we want to make sure we provide relief to those who need it the most. And that is why our tax policies have made sure that workers have more money in their pockets.
Appreciate that. With the economy under heavy strain, revenue and income is down. We don't have much tourists coming to the island as of late, and international companies are the only ones adding to the government tax base. Is there any thought of introducing a income tax to your system?
I think the answer is the same one that I gave before regarding the review that will happen to our system of taxation following the global agreements which Bermuda has signed up to. And at that point in time, when those things are finalized, the Tax Reform Commission under the Minister of Finance will get to work to produce a tax system that meets with the international obligations. But I think when we're speaking about tourism, I think that it's important to recognize that, yes, Bermuda, like many jurisdictions, have been challenged from a tourism perspective. And our biggest challenge from a Bermuda perspective is the closure of the largest private employer and the largest hotel property in Bermuda, and that is the Fairmont Southampton Princess. And my time when I was spent on holiday in California was spent a significant amount of time working with the Minister of Finance, working through the challenges with the developers. There's been numerous meetings this week. There'll be meetings over this weekend, and we're aiming to finalize the development project because it is vitally important for that project to get off the ground. The projection is 700 jobs that will be provided by that development. It will be the largest tourism development or injection of tourism investment capital in the country's history, and that is what we're looking to achieve.
On that note, Fairmont Princess is about to start renovations. How significant is this development for the country overall, tourism recovery, and the job situation? Are Bermudians going to be first in line when this hotel comes back online? And for those that were working there, what is going to be the process for them?
I think that those specific questions will be better addressed by the union and their partners who are working certainly with the developers. But from the aspect of its importance to Bermuda's tourism product, it is vitally, vitally important. It is important because it is the largest hotel property in the country. And airlift is driven by hotel capacity and hotel demand. What we are seeing with airlines reducing their schedule is a direct result of the lack of availability of the beds at the Fairmont Southampton. And that is why our energies and efforts have been focused. There have been numerous discussions with cabinet ministers today. There's going to be discussion in cabinet on Tuesday. We are looking to finalize the circumstance around that. And that is what is vital. And so the importance of Fairmont Southampton Princess to Bermuda's tourism product cannot be understated. When that hotel is closed, other hotels suffer, and that is what we've seen. So this year, we will certainly see additional beds come online with the opening of the Bermuda Beach Resort. We've seen additional beds come online last year with the opening of the St. Regis Resort, but we are going to be pushing forward to make sure the development is completed so that we can see that reopen in 2023, which can support our future tourism recovery, especially when we're talking about the ability to host large group events, which drive so many factors of our tourism economy, which are lost. And we're expecting that group business will return because we know that group business has been challenged in many locations throughout the pandemic. Most of the travel of which we're seeing is leisure travel because it's always risky to book group travel, which is booked multiple years in advance. But that is where the Bermuda Tourism Authority is focused on. Those are where the developers for the Fairmont Southampton are focused on. And that is where we will remain focused.
We spoke of Southampton Princess. What is the update on the Diablo Beach facility? What can you say to those that are watching and Bermudians that, like I said, are unemployed? And once you get back to the hotel industry?
There's
Sorry?
certainly no update to offer for Elbow Beach right now. The government focus is focusing on Fairmont Southampton. Once we get Fairmont Southampton done, then we can move on to other properties. But hotel development is not just the government. We require investors. And that is why we have investors that we're working with in Fairmont Southampton to close out that deal. And then we can move to other large properties. Closing and the development of the Fairmont Southampton is talking about 700 construction jobs, which will be a vital boost to the economy and put us in line for growth in the tourism economy in 2023 and beyond.
But Premier, let me just add to that statement you just made. Our beach is a large facility. It's a part of Bermuda's landscape, and for you not to give an update is a disservice to Bermuda on a whole, and you're the tourism minister.
Trevor, that's your opinion. I'm stating the facts, and what I'm not going to do is lie to the public. Where the government is focused right now is closing out the matters related to Fairmont Southampton. The Elbow Beach property is not owned by the government. It is owned by private investors. They know that that property has been listed for sale. We understand that there may be bids for that, and that is just something that we are going to be paying attention to, but it is a privately owned property, just like the Fairmont Southampton. We're working with the owners there and the developers to make sure we bring that project to fruition, and then we'll be able to move on to properties such as Elbow Beach.
Thank you. Since we talked about airlift, just a few weeks ago, JetBlue said they will service Bermuda on a seasonal basis. How are we going to get airlines to service Bermuda this summer and moving forward? Let me give you an example, and I think I've asked you this question before. In the Bahamas, there are 55 to 60 flights daily, 10 to 15 cruise ships on a weekly basis. How are we going to turn our product and our market around for this summer moving forward?
Bermuda is not a mass tourism destination, and Bermuda will not become a mass tourism destination. And so I think that's something in which we have to recognize and understand. But from the perspective of airlift is driven by hotel development and hotel beds. That is why it's vital to focus on making sure that we get the Fairmont Southampton Princess back up and running, which will be able to drive additional airlift. That is it. So when you say this summer, JetBlue has said from a seasonal service, they're still going to be flying during the summer. We have seen this before, but with a hotel like Fairmont Southampton, which is able to do Greek business throughout the year for large conferences and events, that is necessary for our future tourism project. And so I have no doubt that when those hotel properties come online, we will see airlift. You see airlift with hotel beds. And I would just invite you to compare the the hotel bed capacity in the Bahamas versus what we have in Bermuda. But we have to remember there are two different tourism products.
Good stuff. Let me move on to education. Education is in a state of flux, and some will say confusion. Parents are up in arms, teachers are blue mad, and students are at risk if government doesn't work things out. Will the restructuring go ahead as planned? And do we have the money for the rebuild that will be necessary? Several months ago, your education minister said we will find the money. What do you say to that statement, Premier?
Well, I took my son to school yesterday and had the opportunity to speak to the acting principal at the Northwoods Primary School. And I said to her, like I say to all the teachers in this country, that their service and dedication cannot be thanked enough. Teaching was a very stressful profession before the pandemic. I cannot imagine how stressful it is now. But I can understand some of the stress because as the leader of the government, working with public officers who have been going constantly throughout the time of this pandemic, it is difficult. A pandemic that comes once in a century is a difficult situation, and it will test us. But it is because of the dedication of our teachers and our staff and our principals that we have our students in school that are learning, and we are trying to ensure that we interrupt that as little as possible. So from that perspective, I will certainly accept that education is in a challenging state because every education system around the world is challenged. But our children are in school, where there are some countries where children are not even back in school. We want to ensure that we continue that. In regards to the future matters of education reform activities continue to happen. The Minister of Education hosts numerous, numerous programs talking about the education reform initiative. Parents are involved, students are involved, teachers are involved, educators who are retired are involved in the reform of the education system, and it's going to be vital. And I will echo the the statements of the Minister of Education that we will certainly fund the money for the redevelopment of our school system to execute on those plans, because it is vital for the country's future that we have a public education system that is first class. Our public school teachers are amazing, and I will say this to those that are listening, I cannot thank you enough, because I have seen the dedication firsthand, and I am in awe of your work.
Thank you, Premier. Let's ask another question. We're going to go on to an issue at the MDL. Why did the MDL laboratory come under the Cabinet Secretary remit instead of the Health Department or the Health Minister? I understand that the Dr. Karika Weldon, her stepping down, brought a lot of frustration between coming from the Cabinet Secretary that didn't take her advice. That's why we find ourselves in this position. What do you say to that issue?
What I'll say is that Dr. Karika Weldon has given immense service to this country.
Yes, she is.
Dr. and I are having a meeting tomorrow, and we will discuss matters that are related to what has taken place. But I am immeasurably thankful to not only her service, but also to the service of all the healthcare workers around this country who for the last 20 months have been under incredible stress and pressure. We have a lot to be proud of with our coronavirus response, Bermuda, and a significant part of that was Dr. Weldon coming back home, setting up a testing system, working with our partners, both in the Ministry of Health and throughout government, to ensure that we could deliver a first-class testing system. And the debt of gratitude of which we owe is immense.
You haven't answered the question. The question is, why is the MDL laboratory under the Cabinet Secretary's remit instead of the Health Department or even the CMO?
The MDL lab was set up under the Cabinet Office because that was the place where we thought it was best suited, because the Department of Health was doing a lot of other things at the time of the management of the pandemic. The organization of government does not matter if it's in one department or another department. It is one government, and it has worked remarkably well.
Okay, let's move on. I want to ask this question, reference to the curfew. Why did the government put Bermuda under curfew with very few cases at that particular time? But as of yesterday, January the 20th, lifting the curfew when we have the highest amount of positive cases in our history. Why was help me to understand that move.
Happy to do so, and happy to explain that to your viewers. All of our public health measures are in place from the beginning of this pandemic regarding pressure on our hospital. And we saw in September and October where our hospital became overwhelmed to capacity, had to declare an emergency, where unfortunately and tragically we ran out of space in the morgue. We remember the stress and pressure, you must know, certainly, Trevor, of what took place and the stress and pressure that our workers at the hospital were under. And what we want to ensure is to avoid that. So when we put in place the measures in December, they were put in place to ensure that we did not have that situation again. But we observe what we see and we make adjustments as we have done throughout the time of the management of the coronavirus. So it would not be known when at the end of December, or when the cabinet met, I want to say December 20th to December 21st, prior to the announcement, where we saw cases rapidly escalating. We saw cases rapidly escalating in August, and we made the determination that the hospital would not become overwhelmed because of the rate of vaccination in the community. And we saw what happened. Any government that does not learn from its mistakes previously is not a government that is serving the country well. So recognizing what took place in August into September, We said it is prudent to ensure that we put in place these restrictions, as unfortunate and inconvenient as they are, because we did not want to get back to a place where our hospital is overwhelmed. We have seen record cases, but we've also seen a lower demand on hospital services. And that is the reason why we were able to relax some of our public health restrictions, and we will examine further, because everything is based upon the pressure towards our hospital.
Thank you. As we're going to stay with this topic, can you speak to the Safe Key initiative, as it is no practical to be getting tested every time one wants to go out to a football game, to eat, to a restaurant, or to go to the gym? The process of having to get the Safe Key is becoming overwhelming for the general public. Is it time to do away or to cancel the Safe Key initiative?
I think that there will come a time where safety will no longer be needed. The government of Bermuda started in November and December, as I think I announced in a press conference, where we were reviewing the entirety of all of our public health protocols. And the approach of which I gave to my cabinet ministers was, let us start with a blank slate. Let us say, with all of the lessons of which we've learned since the beginning of the pandemic, if we were to start from scratch, knowing all that we know now, what would the ideal public health stance look like? That review is ongoing. There'll be further discussions with the cabinet committee this week and next week, and the announcements about our future progress, stance, approach to the public health crisis, I would say, or the pandemic, will be made an announcement in the House of Assembly on February 4th. That review is ongoing, and those changes will come into place on April 1st. Ideally, I would like to be in a place where safety may only be needed for very large events. There may be a change, there may be adjustment. I'm not going to prejudge that, but I also recognize the inconvenience and challenge that the Safe Key does pose certain businesses. But we have to remember the basis of our public health restrictions are to ensure that our hospital does not become overwhelmed. We've seen what happens when our hospital becomes overwhelmed, and we do not want to get back to that place again.
Thank you, Premier. CDC has put us, Bermuda, in the level 4, very high category list, even stating to avoid travel to Bermuda. What is your thoughts on that process?
My thought on that process is, if the United States were to rate themselves, there would be a level 4 jurisdiction as well. And I'm firmly of the belief that Bermuda is a safer place to travel than to be in the United States of America. But what I would also state is that many persons will make their own choices and individual decisions based on the pandemic. And there are many people who travel to level 4 jurisdiction on any given day. It is not something that we are going to be able to avoid. The way that the CDC does their restriction levels is that, from a Bermuda perspective, the only way that Bermuda is not a level 4 jurisdiction is if we have less than 2 cases a day. And the only way to have less than 2 cases a day in Bermuda would be to send everyone home and not let them leave their houses. You won't have much of a successful tourism industry if that was the case. So we have to balance, and we'll work through those problems. But I think from a total perspective and understanding, most tourists and visitors are discerning, and they know, recognize the risk. And persons who may have been vaccinated, may have been boosted, know that the risks themselves of being hospitalized or getting seriously ill are very low, and they will make their travel decisions based upon what they feel is right for them.
Thank you. The
UK government,
sorry?
I want to add, Trevor, if I can, is that a majority of the countries that are listed on the United States list are level 4 jurisdictions, an overwhelming majority, and it's just based upon the metrics of which they use. So in a space where you have a very fast spreading variant, it is not a surprise. And the tourism partners, when I met with the hoteliers in December, I made it clear that this is something that will happen. And the only way for Bermuda to not be a level 4, level 3, or level 2 jurisdiction would be for us to keep everyone at home. And you're not going to have a tourism industry if that is the case. So we'll work through that, and we're going to continue to press forward.
The UK government is, well, let's put it this way. COVID is not going nowhere, and the UK government is canceling all restrictions and going back to normal? When do you see Bermuda changing the direction in which we've been going for the last 2 years?
The government is undergoing, as I said in earlier answers, a full policy review. And in that full policy review that the government is examining, we will be making those announcements in February 4th. Those changes are projected to come into place on April 1st. But I think from a philosophical perspective, if the government believes that the hospital is not at risk for being overwhelmed, then we can relax restrictions. That is the test. The United Kingdom has hundreds of hospitals. There are many places that have multiple hospitals. We have one, and we have seen, lived, and experienced what happens when that hospital becomes overwhelmed. We do not want to get back to that place again. So on a philosophical basis, I would far rather spend my time governing, executing the election manifesto which we're elected to execute, rather than worrying about changes to restrictions and things surrounding restrictions. It is not something that the government enjoys in any way, shape, or form. It is not fun. And anyone who thinks governing in a pandemic is fun, I would ask them to change their opinion and their thoughts. But from the perspective of a broader basis, we will make the adjustments which will ensure that our healthcare system is not overwhelmed, and that will be the base of our decisions. So would I like to see the end of all restrictions? Absolutely. But we are going to make sure that we act responsibly to ensure that we do not get to a place where a hospital is overwhelmed.
Premier Burt, what exactly will you and your cabinet do to stimulate the economy and to get Bermudians back to work?
Execute on our economic recovery plan, which we found at gov.bm/economic recovery. And I ask and invite all persons to go ahead and read and see the updates to the work which is taking place. Ministers are focused on executing on those initiatives, and we know that the successful execution of those initiatives will bring additional jobs and growth to our economy.
Thank you, sir. And let me, now this question here is about bringing some clarity and an update on the present situation. Most recently, ministers went on leave and people had to double up. Your ministers had to double up, as we all know. Just for the sake of those who may be wondering, how is the Colonel Birch coming along, and is he going to be up to speed to return back to the House of Assembly, back to his portfolio? What is your thoughts on this, or what is your contingency plan if he doesn't return?
Well, I'm certainly not going to speak to anyone's private medical circumstance, but what I can say is that Colonel and I had a meeting this morning, and I know, and I'm looking forward to his return back to his full duties.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I guess we will find a final overview, Premier Burt. There are a lot of cries for the school system, school teachers, and oh, this one it was. Sorry. There are many schools that have sporadic classes that are out. P1 is in a few schools, P3, P4. Do you think it is possible that the education shall we just do remote learning for 2 weeks so these numbers come down?
The best place for our students to be is in school. We have adjusted and changed our policies throughout the pandemic. The Minister of Education has spoken to that. There are many parents who want to make sure their children remain in school. And so we've gone from a place where our schools were not open. We went to a place where if there was one case in a school, the entire school was sent home. We moved to a place where we're doing individual classes, and now we're doing it to a place where if social physical distancing rules are followed, that only students that are most at risk, and we have the ability to test other students. And that is the perspective which we're following. In a case where you have a rapidly spreading variant, such as the Omicron variant, you will see cases in schools and you will see disruptions. But what we are not trying to do is to wholesale disrupt lives in the case where there may not be significant persons affected, because the basis of our public health restrictions are to reduce the pressure or to reduce the chance that our hospital become overwhelmed. So we have learned, we have adjusted, and so there may be a class out here, there may be a year out here, but that is going to be normal as we continue. But the vast majority of students are in school. Our senior schools are returning to in-person learning next week, and we want to continue this process because it is vital, and the most important place to be is in school. My son was overjoyed to return back to school yesterday after receiving this text. Students want to be in school, want to have that social interaction, to grow and to learn, and they do that far better than they do through a screen. Our children are the ones who have been most impacted by this pandemic, and the government will make sure that we can do everything to ensure that our students are in school learning in the safest environment as is possible.
Premier Burt, my final question. Can you put a dollar value to how much the last 2 years has cost the government and the taxpayers, how much revenue has been utilized? But can you put a figure?
Well, we're going through the budget process right now, Trevor, and so I don't have a figure off the top of my head. But what I would say is that the government made a decision that the public health response will be funded through the travel authorization fees. And so the travel authorization fees, because there's a choice, we can either borrow the money, which we don't have a lot of capacity for borrowing, raise every one of the country's taxes to pay for the contact tracing, the free testing that exists, the regiment support, the persons at the airport, all of the things which are necessary to support the testing that must take place, all the things which are necessary to support a country that is living through a pandemic. But our decision was made that the persons who travel will be the persons who would foot the bill for our public health response. The budget will come out in the House of Assembly on February 25th, and those numbers will be clearly delineated. But it has been a significant expense. But that is the reason why we have said, as we're running up to budget time, that in the end of November, we commenced a top-to-down policy review of everything, and the announcements was made in the House of Assembly on February 4th. And those things will come into place on April 1st, which is in conjunction with our new fiscal year. And we're going to, as a country, have to learn to live with this virus. And that is the perspective which the government will make sure we put forward. That is a large measure of personal responsibility. People must judge for themselves what risks they wish to take at a point in time in the future. And when the government is comfortable that there is enough, let's say, protection in the community, either through vaccination, through prior infection, and other things, that it is a minimal risk to the hospital be overwhelmed, then we'll be able to spend less money on that and invest those funds in the things which are necessary to make sure to provide a safe, secure future for Bermuda.
Can you disclose our debt, amount of debt, since we have a limit on borrowing and there's not been much revenue coming in? What is Bermuda's debt limit?
Well, I would dispute the fact, Trevor, that you said there's not been much revenue coming in, and the Minister of Finance will put forward the budget on February 25th. But what I can state is that our revenue projections that we laid out in the budget in last year, February, our projections are that we've actually exceeded our revenue targets this year. I think the Minister of Finance stated that when he gave the mid-year review. So from that perspective, I dispute the fact that what you're saying, that revenue is not coming in. Though we did not have the most successful tourism season, we certainly did have a number of tourists that came to our shores this year. We saw home porting and cruise ships coming. We will have cruise ships here next year. We will have air visitors here next year. We're going to continue to recover from those aspects. So I'll dispute the issue of you saying not much revenue coming in.
This year or next year? This year or next year?
The current fiscal year which we're in, which ends on ends on March 31st.
Yeah.
But we are expected to exceed our revenue targets, which we set out, because we are executing an economic recovery plan. Look at the work that the Minister of Transport did with the home porting initiative, which was a boost to the economy. The fact that we're able to get cruise ships that were visiting the country, and we're going to even have more cruise ships next year as we work through the travel protocols with our cruise ship partners. So we have set our targets, and we have exceeded the revenue targets for last year, and we're going to continue to work because it is vital that we meet the targets which we set, and also make sure that we are that persons who work inside the tourism industry can know that this year we will have success in our tourism industry. So I'm confident. And the thing is that though we are challenged as a country, just like every country in the world, the government must be confident for the future. And the government must work to ensure that we actually do have a brighter future. And that is what the ministers of this government, who work day in and day out, toil, supported by a wonderful Progressive Labor Party caucus, and supported by an army of dedicated public officers who have worked under incredibly difficult circumstances, continue to deliver for the people of this country each and every single day. We don't get everything right, but one thing that we do get right is our energy and our effort towards this, because we are committed for future success of this country, Trevor, for my children and for yours.
Thank you, Premier. I just had a question coming in real brief before we end.
It was supposed to be half an hour, but you said last question 2 ago. But go ahead, maybe.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's been months. It's been months. I've been able to get to interview you. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. My last question. We have a senior that's just sent me a message talking about her Balco bill and her grocery bills. She doesn't have suffice funding to juggle both. What might you say to her, to them, to this lady, to comfort her?
What I would say to that senior citizen is that in this country of Bermuda, the Minister of Labor has the Department of Financial Assistance. And if there is any senior citizen that is experiencing a challenge with making their ends meet, I would urge them to contact the Department of Financial Assistance, because that is what it is there for, to provide social assistance and help for persons in those circumstances.
Premier Burt, thank you very much. It's been a while. I've been trying to get a hold of you, trying to get an interview of you. So thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Trevor, it would be nice, because I offered you an interview 2 weeks ago Monday, but you were away.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. So thank you for this time. Thank you for those that have been viewing. Thank you for our supporters. Thank you for this particular project, this one-on-one live with Premier Burt, the leader of our country. And on behalf of TNN, yours truly, Trevor Lindsay, Crimson Multimedia Channel 82, co-producers, thank you for viewing and thank you for joining us.